work across a number of different brands, all household consumer items, food items, Orville Redenbacher, Hunt's, Healthy Choice, Marie Callender, etc. And really the change that we're making, I'd say there's two really big things as we sort of think about both the online channel and then just also more broadly. One is just the terminology, video versus TV. It's a fairly minor thing, but it's really about sight, it's about sound, it's about motion, and the ability that that has to have an impact, a stronger emotional impact, the visual component, and just frankly the ability to put a lot of messages in. And so I think one of the things though is trying to change the terminology from TV to video is to think about, we don't really care exactly how the consumer actually goes and consumes that content. Now, at the end of the day, the majority of what we're doing is still traditional TV channels, but the growth rate has been really significant in terms of what we're doing in terms of online video. And interestingly, the TV market itself, as new opportunities are coming out like addressable TV, we're actually finding that the difference between TV and the ability to do addressable targeting, which is getting a lot of marketers all excited about being able to change that message, actually I think in a lot of ways is going to make it easier to take advantage of the video channels. Because I think the second thing that's probably slowed our adoption, and the consumer packaged goods were probably not always leading edge on a lot of the new technology areas, is as you start to do online video, you start to need a wider range of content. And you need that wider range of content because you need different formats, you need different lengths of time versus your traditional TV spot. And we're still going to be doing that, right? So we already have that legacy cost, if you will. But now we have to produce different edits, potentially different versions of the commercials, and to really take advantage of what online video can actually deliver. More specific targeting, you want different versions of different ads, which actually increases the content cost. So I think as we're starting to view it more as video and as online is starting to get the scale, and as marketers we've already started to believe in the power of this addressable TV, which is going to enable us to target more precision, it's actually going to help actually move forward. So I think actually, at first we sort of viewed online video and addressable TV as almost competitors. I think one is going to actually help drive the other, and I think there's going to be a bit of a symbiotic relationship between the two. There's no doubt that any industry, and if you look at cable, what happened there, the viewership on cable grew far more significantly than the dollars did for a number of years. So I'm not surprised to see that in the online space. I think one of the things that's also a little bit is you do have to take out the online usage and things like banner ads, right, which I think everyone would agree there's no banner ad other than maybe a Yahoo or Yahoo or Google or whoever homepage takeover that's going to have the impact as a TV commercial is. So the fact that I'm spending 10 minutes online doesn't mean should it necessarily get that % of the media budget. That analogy doesn't work particularly precise. And now when you get into online video, it's a little different because so much of online video is consumed right in a lean forward mode. It's people actively out searching information or looking for content, and they kind of have to sit through the TV ad. And so I think you can make an argument that specific component, but the reality is online video versus online time is not as big of a proportion. So I wouldn't expect the numbers to move as aggressively, but it's also the counsel of patience, and it's different for somebody who's in that industry than not. Is you didn't see that in cable TV, you didn't see it, so I don't expect to see it here, and we shouldn't be naive to assume that just because things are moving in this digital age and digital speed, there's a lot of methodologies, honestly, there's a lot of baggage, good and bad, intellectual and emotional, with the legacy systems. And there's legacy content and the media partners we traditionally use who are moving a little slow. So not all of them are exactly the right reasons why it's a slower move, but I don't think it should be a big surprise. I think one of the other things that we've had a lot of success, and it's interesting in the online video, I think one of the areas that we're starting to play around a lot more with is similar to the Hispanic multicultural market. And what we found we've had a lot of success is you can shave a little bit off of a lot of TV plans and reinvest those dollars in our case, for instance, in Hispanic or multicultural Spanish language programming, and you can actually, at a very small cost to frequency, dramatically increase your reach, because while there are some people who are consuming both, there's obviously a lot of people who might just be consuming Spanish language media. So we can, against a target for a brand, and for all of our brands, obviously Hispanic consumer is very, very important, we can have a dramatic increase on the reach curve, right? Because so many TV plans now are kind of flattened out on the reach curve, and what you're really just doing is building frequency. And I think that's the other trick that online video is going to have to solve, is in the traditional TV plan, right, at a certain point you've maxed out in terms of your reach. And so any incremental dollar you're spending is bringing up your reach in a negligible amount, and what you're really doing is adding frequency. But of course, there's a great correlation, and that correlation is your top quintile and top 2 quintile TV viewers tend to be lower internet users, and conversely, your bottom quintile TV viewers happen to be the higher video users online. And the reality is, as you get into a flat reach curve there where you're not gaining any incremental reach, that frequency that's happening, it's all happening against those top heavy viewers. So what you could easily do is pare back that plan, take your heavy viewers from seeing your commercials 60 times to now only seeing it 45 times, which, let's be honest, if they didn't move at 45, I don't think they're going to move at 60. But what you can do, reinvest those dollars so that those lower quintile viewers who are only seeing your commercial 2 or 3 times can now see it 2 times online, or excuse me, 2 times offline, but maybe now we can let them see it 6 times online. And that, I think, is where the real opportunity is. So again, that's not going to move it from 20% to 50% of our spend, but I think if right now a lot of companies are in the 10 to 15% mark, certainly in the consumer packaged goods space, I think that could, take it up 50% over the next couple of years. We're not going to be, it's certainly in the online space, heavily research categories like cars and pharma, and we're probably not going to be as aggressive as the direct marketers who can actually tell for that specific investment what they're getting, and if online's working, it's just a numbers game. Consumer packaged goods, right or wrong, is a little softer in terms about how we do the approach, and so I think you see us tend to be a little more conservative in making those moves.
When I think of kind of a brand advertising online with video, I think of 3 things. The first is I'm going to advertise against a video, like a Hulu video or some other network, and I'm going to have a pre-roll. Another type would be somebody's reading a news article,
right,
and instead of just having a graphic banner,
you got a video
I'm going to create a 60 or a 90-second spot. And the third one is obviously, let's produce our own videos and push them out there through YouTube.
We have slightly done a little bit of all 3. So we have done a traditional buy into the equivalent of a Hulu or a pre-roll kind of content. We view that as usually a pretty valuable impression because the consumer wants this content. They're in a model where I think implicitly and possibly explicitly they're accepting the idea that I'll have to watch a couple video ads before my content starts. Because of the limited commercial interruption, we think we're going to get better viewership of that TV. That model, to be honest, is a relatively small volume right now, but we feel pretty good about that. The second idea of sort of the video ad on the side of a news channel, that to me is a much, much less valuable impression. I think it also does, the timing gets to an interesting issue because we have a lot of 30-second commercials. We have a few 60-second. We could online produce 90 and 2-minute. What we have found, by and large, whether we bring people back to our site, whether we try to get them there, the engagement levels with a 60 or second 90 just tends not to be there. So we almost always are using online video to the side, 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds, some level of teaser, potentially with an accompanying ad or a call to action that hopefully can get them to a further action. But we're not, at the moment, we haven't seen a lot of success that would suggest, hey, we should do a 60 or a 90. And then the last part of it was...
creating your own content.
Oh, creating our own content, right. That's one of those really tricky questions because I get calls all the time from the folks on the brands. Hey, I want my Swagger Wagon, I want my Old Spice, whatever. And the reality is those campaigns had tremendous offline pushes that aren't talked about as much. And I think it's also the ability to go viral on something. Let's be honest, it's a crapshoot. I think the danger is when people view viral as necessarily a cost-efficient measure. If you have a batting average of 100, then yeah, it's actually a much more about. But the reality is I think your batting average of something that's going to gain some interest and acceptance is going to be 1 in 5 or 1 in 10. And the reality is a lot of those campaigns get successful because of a media investment. So I think if you view viral as, hey, here's a way to get a range of content to engage people, excite them, but the majority of impressions in most cases is going to be driven by what I'm paying and the forced placement I get, but every so often I'm going to have one of these hits that's going to take on a life of its own. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think viewing it as some companies do of, hey, let's throw a couple viral videos out there and see what's happening. There's a heck of a lot more of those that have failed miserably than that have had even modest success.
So we just talked about kind of 3 buckets of types of video: the pre-roll, the side of site on a, let's say, text article, and then like producing your own videos as, ConAgra as content production company. How are you measuring all this to decide what's successful and what's not? And are the tools there to help you, or are you still waiting for great tools? Like, where are we in terms of you being able to measure effectively?
Yeah, you'd bring a different answer to different folks in the company. We use a lot of MMA, marketing mix analysis, optimization stuff, and we feel pretty confident that for larger digital campaigns we can understand the impact. And by and large, what I've seen over the last couple of years is almost every time, particularly when you get into really specific verticals like search, but certainly even for online video or just display, we have seen online work better for us. The problem for most of the video stuff, when it isn't paired with display, the volume of impressions we've had don't show up in a lot of those marketing mixes. Because if we're spending $15 million traditionally on TV that's producing hundreds and hundreds of millions of impressions, and I spend $500,000 in online video, I'm not necessarily getting a clean read to be able to understand it. And that's based on our metric of success in terms of ROI coming out of that MMA. To the degree that we sort of step back and look at things against purchase intent, awareness, exposed versus control, we start to see some really nice lifts. The reality is that's not the metric that we use in a lot of cases to make our final decisions. And so not having that ability does hamper how quickly we're going to move the investment. But it's inevitable that more investment is going to go there. I think it's just the pace is going to be a little different. You know, it's early to tell. One, because I don't want to give away some special strategy we have, and two, because, you know, honestly, the upfront is just sort of getting underway. I think it'd be fair to say the market's pretty strong right now, so I expect to see some big increases in the upfront, or at least initially there's a chance there's going to be a higher number. Honestly, all that will do for somebody like us is accelerate our willingness to go and try other things and try to get, there's a guy at Google who brought up, Michael Steve, who brought up this idea of, you know, the 50-cent dollar worth of advertising. You know, as the upfront pricing gets more aggressive and the costs rise out of proportion to some of the other channels, we're more likely to invest in those other channels. What I would say is I don't view most of the networks, and I'm not going to call out anyone's one way or another, as particularly strong at driving some innovative thinking about, hey, think about your plan as video, don't think about your plan as TV, oh, and by the way, we'll do some added value video. I don't think they're as much the former, they're much more the latter, and I think that's going to hamper the ability. Now, at the end of the day, the bulk of the dollars are still traditional TV, that's still going to be a lucrative market, and given the economic recovery and the tightness of the markets right now, it'll do real well for them for a year or two, but I do think they're going to have to be more aggressive about helping make that switch, or they're going to get themselves into some real trouble.